everybody, welcome back. So today is Wednesday, so if you're on Google Classroom, you're going to find Wednesday 9-2 and you will see Finding One's Voice. So like always, I've got step-by-step what you need to do. So number 1, read Finding One's Voice by Julius Lester. Number 2, watch the YouTube video at this link. Number 3, complete the questions on the Google form, and then you're going to make another identity chart like we did a couple days ago. So we are going to read Finding One's Voice together. So you will click that PDF. Okay, there we go. Julius Lester, a noted author, describes how discovering an ancient form of poetry helped him find his voice and define his own identity. So remember, we are still dealing with this question of what is identity, what makes up identity, and so be thinking about that as we read. I grew up in the 40s and 50s in Kansas City, Kansas, and Nashville, Tennessee, with summers spent in Arkansas. The 40s and 50s were not pleasant times for blacks, and I am offended by white people who get nostalgic for the 50s. I have no nostalgia for segregation, for the no-colored allowed signs covering the landscape like litter on the smooth green grass of a park. I have no nostalgia for the time when I endangered my life if, while downtown shopping with my parents, I raised my eyes and accidentally met the eyes of a white woman. Black men and boys were lynched for this during my childhood and adolescence. So I want to pause this and just give a little bit of context. So far, what we know about this text, he's talking about the 1940s and 50s, and this is the time of segregation. Whites and blacks couldn't do anything together. Everything was segregated. No colored allowed signs, like he mentions, they're everywhere. And he says, my life is in danger if I even look into the eyes of a white woman. Black men and boys were lynched for this. And this word lynched, if you don't know, that means they were hung. They were hung and killed for that during his childhood and adolescence. This word nostalgia is also one that maybe you don't know. But nostalgia just means that you are thinking back on something and thinking of it fondly. Like you're kind of reminiscing on the good old days, right? That's kind of this feeling of nostalgia. And so he's saying, I get really mad when white people get all nostalgic about the 40s and 50s. Because he said there's no nostalgia for that time for me because it was a horrible time for Black Americans. Okay, we're going to keep going. I grew up in a violent world. Segregation was a deathly spiritual violence, not only in its many restrictions on where we could live, eat, go to school, and go after dark. There was also the constant threat of physical death if you looked at a white man in what he considered the wrong way, or if he didn't like your attitude. There was also the physical violence of my community. One of the pivotal experiences of my life came when I was 18. I wandered into the bookstore in downtown Nashville one frosted gray day in late autumn, aware that I was looking for something. I was looking for myself, and I generally find myself, while wandering through a bookstore, looking at books until I find the one that is calling me. On this particular day, I wandered for quite a while until I picked up a paperback with the word haiku on the cover. What is that? I wondered. I opened the book and read. I'm going to pause there again. If you aren't familiar with haiku, I think probably most of you guys are. I know when I was in elementary school, we had to write haikus. But it is a form of, I think it said Japanese. Okay, it didn't say. It's either Chinese or Japanese poetry, and it follows a very strict structure. And you will see that in a few poems that he is going to share. So he's picked up this book of poems. They're all about haikus. I opened up the book and read. On a withered branch, a crow had settled. Autumn nightfall. I trembled and turned the pages hastily until my eyes stopped on these words. A giant firefly, that way, this, and it passes by. I read more of the brief poems, these voices from 17th century Japan, and I knew. This is my voice. Okay, I'm going to pause there again. Just to clarify, yes, it's from 17th century Japan, not China, so sorry about that. This simplicity, this directness, this way of using words to direct the soul to silence and beyond, this is my voice, I exulted inside. Then I stopped. How could I, a little colored kid from Nashville, Tennessee, and that is all I knew myself to be in those days, like perpetual death knells, how could I be feeling that something written in 17th century Japan could be my voice? I almost put the book back, but that inner prompting which had led me to it would not allow such an act of self-betrayal. I bought the book and began writing haiku, and the study of haiku led to the study of Zen Buddhism, which led to the study of flower arranging, and I suspect I'm still following the path that opened to me on that day when I was 18, though I no longer write haiku. I eventually understood that it made perfect sense for a little colored kid from Nashville, Tennessee to recognize his voice in 17th century Japanese poetry. Who we are, by the sociological and political definitions of society, has little to do with who we are. So that last line really brings us back to that question about what is identity and how much of our identity is determined by society. I already forgot his name. Julius Lester here is saying what society, the sociological definition, and political definition, what they say about who I am, has nothing to do with who I am. It has very little to do with who I am. It reminds me of a quote that says, let me see if I can remember it. What other people think about you is none of your business, if you've heard that quote. I think it's from a TV show, but I can't really remember at the moment. But basically, yeah, what he's saying is what society thinks that I should be as a black 18-year-old boy has really little to do with who I am. If I want to read poetry and I want to write poetry, I'm going to write poetry no matter what society thinks about it. And so he's pushing back and he's claiming his identity as his own. He's saying whatever society thinks my identity is doesn't really have to do with who I am. So again, we've got connection questions. So I will exit off of this. But before we do the connection questions, I've got a video for you guys to watch. So if you click on that link, I can't show you the video, obviously, because you are watching this video. I guess I could. I don't know how that would work. But you will probably recognize this. This is the High School Musical cast, Stick to the Status Quo. And so I think that there are a lot of connections to be made between this video and the text that we just read about what is the status quo? What does pushing against the status quo mean? What does that look like? What are these assumptions that people have made about us based on gender, based on race, and based on status? And how much of that do we push against? And so watch this video. If you want captions, you can click this subtitles and it will give you the lyrics on the screen. But once you have watched that video, complete the questions on the Google form. So real quick, I'll read through these. Why does Julius almost put the book of haiku back on the shelf? What factors led to his momentary doubt that haiku is for him? So go back in the text, see if you can find what he says. Why did he almost put the book back on the shelf? What does it mean to find yourself? Where does Julius Lester say he finds himself? And where do you go to find yourself? So where do you go when you feel lost, when you feel like you just need a moment for yourself, you need to go somewhere where you feel at peace? Where do you go? Where does Julius go? What connections can you make between the song Stick to the Status Quo from High School Musical and the text? So any connection that you could make. And then finally, what are you passionate about? And how do the things that you are passionate about help shape who you are? So Julius became passionate about haiku. What are you passionate about? How does that shape who you are? Another example, for most of my life, I was a softball player. I played softball for like 18, 17 years, something like that. And I was really passionate about it, and that shaped who I was. That made up a big part of my identity. So what are you passionate about, and how does that shape who you are? And then just your first and last name. And then you have one more assignment for today, which again is that identity chart. So if you click on the Google Doc, it's pretty much the exact same as the last one, except I've changed, it's now Julius Lester instead of Jonathan Rodriguez. You're still looking for 10 identity traits. And again, yours does not have to look like this example. If you want to just do a list, you can just do a list. But remember to include some quotes from the text, and you need at least 10 identity traits. And then make sure, like always, up here at the top somewhere should be a button that says Turn In. So you want to click that Turn In button. If you can't find that Turn In button, then go back to the assignment and there should be a Turn In button here, and you can click on that Google Doc that you just did. But do not click the share and send it to me. Do not do that, because again, it will get lost in my email and I won't have it for your grade. So make sure you always turn it in on Google Classroom, not share. And so that's your work for today. Again, we are still in this pre-reading phase, kind of getting some basic knowledge of some complex ideas that we're going to deal with in the novel. So we've got 2 more days this week, Thursday and Friday, and then next week we will start reading To Kill a Mockingbird. As always, if you need help, if you're having trouble, Email me and I will do my best to help you.